Hello interstellar everyone, welcome to class 12 biology. In this video we will discuss about common human diseases caused by helminths and fungi. So the two helminths diseases that we have to discuss in detail are ascariasis and elephantiasis, or it is also called as filariasis. Okay, so we have got two helminth diseases and we have got one fungal disease, that is ringworm. So we will be discussing about these three diseases in this particular video. So before we discuss about ascariasis, we need to understand what are helminths. Helminths are large parasitic worms. They are macroparasites. They are also called as endoparasites because they can live inside and feed inside their living host. And in doing so, they draw nourishment from their host and harms them in the process by causing diseases. Right? So helminths are endoparasites. They are macroparasites because the adult form of those worms, we can see them with our naked eyes, right? And they can cause diseases within the human beings. So therefore they're also classified as pathogens. Ascariasis is caused by one such parasitic worm called Ascaris lumbricoides. So here I have shown you the picture of Ascaris lumbricoides. They are commonly called as roundworms. So this particular name is pretty important. Ascaris lumbricoides is the pathogen which is responsible for causing ascariasis. This particular worm is one of your spottings in your practical examination. Okay, it may come as one of the spottings in your practical examination. So therefore you have to remember this particular name, Ascaris lumbricoides. Don't mistake this for earthworm. Many students mistake this for earthworm and therefore they make wrong identification during the spotting. So here we have Ascaris lumbricoides, the commonly called as roundworms, which is responsible for causing ascariasis. And this particular worm, it infects the intestines through contaminated food and water. Right? It infects our intestines through contaminated food and water, and when it enters, right, it causes infection, and the symptoms include internal bleeding. We get muscular pain, we get fever, and anemia, and blockage of intestinal passage. Blockage of intestinal passage, it occurs when there is a large number of worms growing within the intestine. Right? If a large number of roundworms grows within your intestine, those worms, they can block your intestinal passage, and that becomes really serious. You may have to remove that part of the intestine where there is intestinal blockage due to ascaris. Okay, so that is about the symptoms. So what are the control measures? Right? Since it infects through contaminated food and water, we have to follow educated hygienic habits, right? Such as using toilets instead of going out to do your business, right? So that kind of hygienic habits should be put into culture, right? And we should avoid eating raw fruits and vegetables, right? You should eat properly cooked meals, okay? And you should drink safe drinking water. So if you suffer from ascariasis, right, you may have to go to the doctor, right? He will diagnose. If it is ascariasis, he will prescribe ascaricide drugs, which can kill the ascaris growing within your intestine. Okay, so that is about the ascariasis. Now let us take a look over here. I have shown you a picture over here. This is the part of the intestine where, due to growth of large number of Ascaris lumbricoides, there is an intestinal blockage. So in such cases, the part of the intestine may have to be removed surgically by the doctor. Okay, so these worms, they can grow pretty large, right? They can grow up to 35 centimeters long. To put that size in perspective, you have that ruler, right? The one which you use for putting lines on your answer sheets. So that ruler is about 30 centimeters long, and this particular worm can grow up to 35 centimeters. So it is much longer than your ruler. So these worms, they are pretty large. Okay, now let us take a look at the life cycle of Ascaris lumbricoides in order to understand the infection better. We will start from here, right? From number 1, we have got adult male and female. Remember, this is sexually dimorphic species. Ascaris lumbricoids is sexually dimorphic. So we have got two sexes, male and female. Male is much smaller, female is much larger over here, right? So they are morphologically different. Now, adults, they are found within the small intestines, right? And the females, they can lay about 200,000 eggs in a day, right? And those eggs, they are passed along with the feces outside, right? So along with the feces of the infected person, right, the eggs are ingested and it enters into the soil, right, along with the feces. And some of the eggs, they are unfertilized, they are not infectious, but those which are fertilized eggs, they are infectious. So these fertilized egg, they will gradually develop into an embryonated egg with larva. They will develop into a larva within the egg when it is outside the body, right? It develops into a larvae, and that larvae is quite infective, right? So when we ingest that larvae accidentally along with contaminated food and water, what happens is the egg hatches and the larvae comes out. Okay, so the egg hatches and the larvae comes out, and larvae goes straight to the small intestine. It survives the stomach acid and it goes into the small intestine. From the small intestine, the larvae, it is still a larvae, it is not adult yet. So the larvae, it goes towards the lung through circulatory system. It enters into the bloodstream. The larvae can somehow enter into the bloodstream by penetrating through the intestinal lining, intestinal mucosa, and it will enter into the bloodstream and go towards the lungs. And there the larvae slowly changes, right? It starts to develop into adult larvae, right? And from the lungs, it will enter into the alveoli, and from alveoli it will move towards the throat, and from throat it will be swallowed back into the small intestine, and there it will fully mature, and we are back to the same stage, to adult stage in the small intestine. Okay, so now if you pay proper attention, if you study this diagram properly, you can clearly see that in order to complete its one life cycle, right, the worm has to come out of the human body. So the life cycle occurs in two different places, one inside the host and one outside the host. So a part of its life cycle occurs within the host and a part of its life cycle happens outside the host. I think the reason behind this is optimum temperature, right? Inside the human body, the adult can survive. Outside the human body, since it is cooler, the embryo or the larval form can survive. Okay, so you can check about that information in other websites. So that is about the life cycle of the Ascaris lumbricoids and how it spreads from people to people. Right? So this is also fecal oral route. Right? So this particular disease or this particular pathogen also spreads through fecal oral route. So since it spreads through contaminated food and water. Okay, so that is ascariasis. Elephantiasis, also called as filariasis or lymphatic filariasis, is another infectious human diseases caused by helminths or parasitic worms. So the pathogen responsible for causing elephantiasis is Wuchereria species. So there are two species given in your textbook, Wuchereria bancrofti and Wuchereria malai, which are known to cause elephantiasis. And among these two, Wuchereria bancrofti is the common parasite which causes filariasis or elephantiasis. So I have given a picture of Wuchereria bancrofti or the filarial worm over here. So this particular parasitic worm, it is much smaller compared to Ascaris. I said Ascaris can grow up to 35 centimeters in length, whereas this particular filarial worm, Wuchereria bancrofti, it can grow about 50 to 100 millimeters in length. Right, so males are much smaller than the females over here as well, and this particular parasite can be transmitted by mosquitoes. Different types of mosquitoes can carry this particular parasite, right? So it is a mosquito-borne disease. Okay, so it spreads by mosquito bites, and it first infects the bloodstream. When an infected mosquito bites a healthy human being, the parasite first infects the bloodstream, and from the bloodstream it will move into the lymphatic system, where it will mature and cause all the complications. And the symptoms of elephantiasis includes inflammation of the organ in which the parasite lives, right? Usually it is the lymphatic vessels of the lower limbs, right? So it can also live within the genital organs, right? And the result is the formation of gross deformities. Since it induces swelling and inflammation, it causes gross deformities of the infected organs. And what are the control measures? Since it is spread by mosquitoes, the vector control is the primary control measure, right? So you should try to prevent mosquitoes from growing around your household. So that is the control measure. And if you suffer from filariasis, if the filarial worm enters within your body, the doctors can prescribe drugs like albendazole in combination with ivermectin. I don't know about other schools, but in our schools, every once or twice a year, a nurse, an Indian nurse with the white sari, comes into our school, and she gives this sweet tasting tablet. And if you check that particular tablet, albendazole is written at the back. So this is a deworming tablet, right? Which you should eat. It's sweet, right? It is not that bitter smelling, bitter tasting tablets like others, right? So that particular tablet, it helps in removing the worms from within our body. So those parasitic worms can be removed from our body system. So albendazole is one of that particular drug. Okay, so elephantiasis. And if you take a look at the picture over here, so this is elephantiasis. So this person is suffering from elephantiasis. The filarial worm, it resides within the lymphatic vessels of the lower limbs. So in the lower limbs, the filarial worm lives, and it causes complications like swelling of the limbs, right? And it's not just the swelling, the skin also turns thick and dry. Okay, so and later on it causes pain as well, right? So it's quite a debilitating disease. And since the legs, they become really large, and the skin also becomes rough and dry, therefore the disease has been given the name as elephantiasis, like the limbs of the elephant. Okay, and it is not just the limbs, it can also affect the groin part as well as the breast part as well. So that is about the elephantiasis disease. Now let us try to take a look at the life cycle of the filarial worm, Wuchereria bancrofti, in order to understand the disease better. Okay, so we will start from here. As I told you that this particular disease is mosquito borne. The mosquito, any form of mosquito, Anopheles, Culex, Aedes, any type of mosquito can carry this particular disease, right? And the mosquitoes, if the mosquito is infected, when an infected mosquito bites a healthy human being, right, she will inject or deposit the L3 larval form of the Wuchereria bancrofti. So now this L3 larval form, it will go into the adults, into the lymphatic system, right, into the lymphatic system of the human being, where it will mature into adults. And the adults, it is of two sexes over here, male and female. They will reproduce sexually, and the female, the adult females, it will produce thousands and thousands of microfilariae, which is covered with a membranous sheath. Okay, so that is why it is called as sheathed microfilariae. So the sheathed microfilariae, it can now migrate, some motile form, it will migrate from the lymphatic system into the blood channels. Now it will be traveling within the blood system. And when another mosquito bites this infected person, she will pick up these microfilariae from this particular human being. Now the microfilariae will enter into the gut of mosquito. So inside the gut of the mosquito, the microfilariae will shed its membranous sheath, and the larvae will move, right? The larvae will move from mosquito's gut to the thoracic muscles. It will enter into the mosquito's muscles. And inside the muscles of the mosquito, the larvae will gradually develop into L1, L2, L3, right? So it will gradually mature, right? So when it reaches the L3 larval stage, the larvae will migrate to the head of the mosquito, and it will move towards the proboscis. The proboscis is the organ which mosquito uses for piercing our skin to drink blood. Okay, so when this particular mosquito bites another healthy human being, she will deposit the L3 larva into the next human being. So that is how the disease spreads, right? And if you look at the life cycle of the Wuchereria bancrofti, you can clearly see that the real reproduction happens within the human being. The sexual reproduction happens within the human being, where its number increases. I said that the adult female will produce thousands and thousands of sheeted microfilaria. Inside the mosquito, the number does not increase. The larvae just gradually transforms into L1, L2, and L3. Right? The number does not increase inside the mosquito's body. The number increases, or the reproduction happens within the human host, not in the mosquito host. Okay, so that is about the life cycle of Wuchereria bancrofti. Now please remember that these life cycles of Wuchereria bancrofti, life cycle of Ascaris lumbricoides, these are not necessary for you to learn from examination perspective. I have introduced you these life cycles of the pathogens in order for you to understand the disease better. Okay, so you don't have to study this life cycle in detail. You don't have to memorize them. Right? These are just for your extra knowledge. All right, we will now discuss about a very infectious human skin disease caused by fungal pathogens. Okay, so the name of the disease is ringworm, and the pathogen responsible for causing ringworm belongs to the fungal genera Microsporum, Trichophyton, and Epidermophyton. So these are the three fungal genera, the species of which can cause a disease called as ringworm in human beings. Right? So you might have seen this particular disease, people suffering from this particular disease. It's called as ringworm. Okay, so but don't confuse. This is not caused by worms. Right? So we have studied about those diseases which are caused by parasitic worms. They are Ascariasis and what was that? Filariasis. Okay, but ringworm, it's just a misnomer. Unlike the name, ringworm is not caused by a worm, it is caused by fungus. Okay, what are the modes of infection of this particular disease? Since it's a skin disease, it is generally acquired from soil. It is also acquired by sharing of towels, clothes, and even comb with infected person. Right? So that is how the mode of infection occurs. What are the symptoms of ringworm? You will develop, if you suffer from ringworm, you will develop dry, scaly lesions on skin. Lesions means this particular shape of inflammation. Right? You will develop dry, scaly lesions on skin, on nails, and on your scalp. Right? And this particular fungal disease, or the fungus responsible for this particular disease, it thrives or it survives in skin folds such as groin or between the toes, right? And it results in intense itching. Now the fungus, they can grow well in a place where there is proper moisture and proper heat. And since the skin folds and skin folds such as groin or between the toes is where people sweat a lot, there is proper moisture and there is proper heat, right? And the fungus, they can easily grow in these regions. Right? So they occur mostly in such regions. Ringworm occurs mostly in such regions where there is more heat and moisture. What are the control measures of ringworm? Proper personal hygiene is really important. Right? You have to avoid coming in direct contact with the infected person, or you should also you can also avoid coming in indirect contact by sharing of towels, clothes, or comb with the infected person. If you suffer from ringworm, you should seek medical attention, and you should take drugs and antifungal creams as treatment. So this is about the ringworm. So this disease is caused by, remember, this disease is caused by fungus, not by parasitic worm. You have to remember just that. Okay. So in our next video, we will discuss about immunity. Now we will go into studying immunology, right, our immune system. And in our next video, we will see what is immunity, and we will talk about the types of immunity. Please read about these two topics, this topic, and then you can watch the next video. Thank you.